Hey, I'm lurppis. I played Counter-Strike for a living for 8 years. I've been on the desk for some of the biggest events for 5 years. I know nothing about Counter-Strike, but then again, neither does Thorin. Welcome to his YouTube channel.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Snake and Banter, the show I do with Mauisnake here. I've actually just noticed, it's mildly tilted me, that even though I write it Snake and Banter, and ampersand sign, because that's usually the way it'd be written. I noticed actually on the overlay they have written Snake and with the word and. So we fucked up the marketing. That's already ruined. I've even sworn 22 seconds in, so I'm going to have to put a really long ident from someone so we don't get demonetized. I might actually just edit that. I'll put like, because that's apparently I'm a sellout as well. Now I don't even believe in freedom of speech anymore. Now I'm actually censoring myself, which is essentially how the neoliberal nightmare actually unfolds, is that it wasn't anyone with guns just pointing at me on a what, well, that'll come, give it a few years. But like at this point in time, we're just doing it to ourselves. In many ways,
Thatcher's wet dream.
Doing it to ourselves. Exactly. And now you've also mentioned a deeply divisive political figure. The video was 100% demonetized. Luckily, we weren't doing it just for money, though. That's the good news there.
I'm here for exposure.
Exactly. No, our guest for this one is Tomi, which I always tell him, even though I get totally why he changed his name, not least because if you're working with Americans, you can't really have a name with piss at the end of it, no matter even if it's not spelled that way, whichever one spells it wrong. But I get why you changed it. But the problem is, if I just go, it's Tomi, like a lot of people won't know. So he basically, it's lurppis, if you know him back in the days, 1.6 player, analyst, and then obviously working with IGC and mibr.
I do hate to tell you that there's probably about 300 people left who know who I am, and then everybody else is a 12-year-old who's watching this.
Yes, that is true. And I will also say as well,
literally we're not alive when I played Counter-Strike.
I will also say as well, because I know this is going to be really shocking information, but it is like, I feel like I'm Morpheus. I've got to help these people break out of the matrix, right? If you're Brazilian, you have no stake in the team org mibr. You are loosely represented by mibr because it's called Made in Brazil and it has Brazilian players. But believe it or not, they're not actually obliged to make the team you want, to have the best team even. Believe it or not, there's almost no connection there. But if you are a fan, feel free to continue being a fan. And by the way, as long as we don't have to read it, continue providing all that excellent Twitter engagement, which you definitely do. I will say, by the way, I know loads of Brazilian fans are always like, you blocked me and I'm actually a fan. It's like, if you tweet at me in Portuguese, I don't hit translate, I just block. Like, you have to understand. At that point in time, I find it mildly obnoxious that you claim to be my fan but think I speak Portuguese. Like, I don't know that you've really thought this one through, really, have you? So, right, we'll start the episode. As ever, by the way, we always start with the good. And all I'll say on this one is, because I obviously know the topics, once it gets to the bad, there's some outrageous stuff in there. But we'll wait to, like, put it this way, man's actually fairly tame. Man's just about, like, Counter-Strike and a guy leaving the team or something. But some of these boys are wilding. So we'll start out with the good, of course. So what we do, Tomi, is we always make the guests start first. So what was the good topic that you wanted to talk about?
So my good topic is we are only about 3 weeks away to one of the most interesting parts of the year, which is right after the major, when all the player changes are going to take place. That's already kind of started for some of the teams that failed to make it. But I think there's going to be fireworks in a couple of weeks because everybody's been kind of holding on to teams way past their expiration dates, just waiting for the coming major for the past 1.5 years. And I think there's going to be fireworks in a month's time or 2 months' time.
Do you have any specific teams you want to actually highlight that you're looking forward to seeing?
Well, I like Nico. I think he's a good guy. He's a great player. And the current G2 roster is starting to feel more and more like the mouse roster of the old days. And I'm hoping that he gets some help in the quote unquote off season. That I think is the easiest one. And I think the one where there's actually is going to have like meaningful implications on the competitive scene, depending on what they end up doing, if they do anything at all.
I'm interested in what happens to EG, just period. I can't really see this team keeping this 5. I mean, this is basically like a 1-3 Swiss stage kind of result coming up for them that I see. And if they surpass that, then good for them. But if it's pretty obvious what's gonna happen. The writing's on the wall, and I'm really curious if the org is even like interested anymore, because people have been saying for the last year and a half this is like they should be pulling out of CS, but now they made the major, and I think if they were one BO3 loss to Extremum away from basically disbanding, so I think there's something to do there with those players.
Put it this way, I definitely agree with the general sentiment that lurppis is bringing up here. Like, I actually think it's basically the flaw with how they've structured the RMR and it lasting so long, and the fact that you get a deduction if you take a player away, combined with there were no lands, so no one could really know how good any of the players were. Unfortunately, not only is the level of the major not going to be that great, ESL definitely helped with that. But also, like, realistically, most people are basically going to use it as the baptism of fire with their lineups. And if you don't make it through, a lot of people... Like, I was just thinking of this. I've just pulled up the HLTV top 10 right now. I'll just run through this, right? So remember, we're talking the top 10 teams in the world. Logically, most of them, especially if they get, like, you know, a top 8 spot, shouldn't be making roster moves, right? But let's just look at the top 10. So Na'Vi, right, logically, they shouldn't be making a move. They're obviously in a pretty good spot. Number 2 is NIP. Anyone in the world who, first of all, imagines this is a good top 10 if NIP can be number 2. And secondly, I don't believe even the NIP players could sit in a fucking lie detector and actually pass and say that all 5 players are good enough to be in the team. Like, there's no world in which this team surely stays with this 5-man lineup. If they do, it'd be depressing, by the way, and they will not be number 2 for very long. So there's number 2 already off the list, right? Vitality... Mate, Kyojin is still fucking Garbo. Like, I'm willing to give him a little bit of time in the sense that, like, that coach has to some degree worked miracles. But even so, if I was making my, like, triage decision, he's just gone tomorrow. Like, if anything, they win in spite of him. I'll keep going. Gambit can obviously stay. That's fine. Heroic, that's fine. OG... Anyone who's even an OG fan wants them to make fucking roster moves. Like, they're just not quite good enough, are they? And they're the perfect example of the sort of team I hate, which is, okay, they're ranked number 6 right now. They're the number 6 team that I would predict to lose against every fucking team ranked above them and maybe a couple below them. Like, they don't have any of the sort of, like, ceiling to win an event. It's just depressing to be a fan. Then there's the aforementioned G2, which, as we said, mate, you could go a million ways on that one. Like, I'm of the mood with them right now. I could be up for cutting everyone except Nico. I have days when I think some of them could stay. So there's one. FaZe is number 8, and it goes without saying Olaf Meister should not even be in that lineup. Astralis is number 9, and they already clearly are going to have roster moves. Team Liquid is number 10. In theory, probably don't need roster moves, but we just know the way that team is. It's probably going to happen anyway. That was just the fucking top 10, boys. Like, there was only like 2 teams that don't have to do anything. Like, that's, I think, I agree.
Well,
Unfortunately,
you don't need to do anything today. You know, there's a lot of Counter-Strike to be played in 3 weeks that might lead to a need to make changes all of a sudden.
Nah, but the problem is unless Gambit and Na'Vi literally came last place, I wouldn't really change right now. Like, I could see that being a blip because those teams have been so good generally, you know. But no, the problem is the others, like, have just glaring holes or, like, players that should... In fact, if you notice collectively, that's why the top 10's so weak, because if you're NIP, it's like, wow, how'd you get number 2? It's like, well, I just ran down about 7 of the other 8 teams below them have massive fucking flaws. Like, at that point in time, you just... It's like the old joke, isn't it? You don't have to be able to outrun a lion. You just have to be able to outrun the fucking guy next to you. That's all an IP's done. They haven't outrun the Lions, boys. So I think this is fucked. I think that, sadly, this will have a bad impact on the major. We've had it in past majors, though, to be fair. Yeah,
and I mean, we talked about it some other time, but I think it was the Boston major where the group stage was in Atlanta, and I think like 14 out of the 16 teams that actually made the major itself, we knew we were going to make changes already going into the event. Like, we actually knew what changes they were going to make. So that was just that. Like, that was like a bit of a joke, but that was the January scheduling. We're a little bit better now, but obviously still not where it needs to be in that regard. And I mean, look, I think a big part of the problem I think this has also been touched on before, but the reason that many of these teams are the way they are now is talent is just way more distributed than it's ever been before in the history of Counter-Strike. And I think it's mostly driven by 2 things. One, teams have more money, so they're paying players more. And then as a result, they have better contracts and they can enforce those contracts. So whereas previously you would never be in a scenario where 10 of the world's best players might be distributed around the 8 best teams, that would have just never ever happened before, because the best players generally want to play together. They would have just combined themselves into, like, you know, 3 or 4 teams, something of that nature. Now there's just like very good players going up to like top 20, top 25 in some instances. Yes. But then there's, like, you know, teams in the top 3 where you're not really sure what somebody's doing there. And I think that's just like never been the case. And it's not clear that there's going to be like broad fixes to that, like, you know, but I think every single time there's a situation where a bunch of different players contracts end, and, you know, who knows when there's ever alignment on that, I think you can expect like very significant changes. And I also do think that at some point there's going to be some players who are going to opt for more flexibility instead of locking in money.
Okay. I will say as well, another factor that I've actually brought up myself, because I think it just goes so lost, is that one of the worst effects of the online era was that basically when we were 6 months into it, people had to just bite the bullet and realise this is just kind of what the Counter-Strike is right now. I can't actually look to when lands are going to come back. I can't keep my roster and just say I'm not going to make any changes. And so unfortunately, I do think people adapted by recruiting young and less experienced players who were good online, which by the way, in that context makes perfect sense. The problem is, it means now you get to this point where another reason the major's a bit underwhelming is you have all these lineups where it's like, we don't even know if this guy's that good in a tier 1 line or what will happen if he's in a major semi. And so it's why, as much as for a fan it'll be exciting, it's not the greatest if you want, like, as an analyst, what you like is like known quantities. Like, this team's going to play this way, player A is going to play performance X level, you know, and this guy's going to play Z level. Like, you know where you're at.
Yeah,
like, we don't have that right now.
I think that's gonna like incur a different kind of grading after the major, because I even just think about it more when you mentioned that EG should probably online be one of the worst teams here, but at LAN, I mean, Breeze and Stan have a really great track record, and Cirque.
Sure.
You know, that's an excellent core for LAN, and it's something that kind of slips my mind when just kind of grading these rosters at first glance. Like you'd probably think a roster like ENCE it shows so much potential, but none of them are LAN proven, with the exception of maybe Snappy.
Yes.
Like so then there's definitely like there's gonna be the stage factor, the performing in front of an audience factor, that is going to kind of realign what we know about players and how they're valuable in certain settings but not valuable in others. And it almost feels like we're moving back. I think this kind of actually moves into my point, my good. So if we want to go there.
Yeah. I'll even say, by the way, it does make being a GM one of the hardest things to do in CS, because effectively you have to do a hybrid roster. You have to have a team that can be good online, but also if you have a LAN tomorrow, it has to be good there. So it's like, fucking hell, I'm not a miracle worker, mate. I just pick good players. So go on then, let's move into your point then. What was your point for good?
Yeah, my good is simply that there's a handful of LAN events on the horizon. So we're not even just getting the major. We got the Blast Fall Finals. We've got the Blast World Finals. I'm pretty sure they're trying to do IEM Winter on LAN. They're going to do... There's basically the end of this... The whole last 2 months of this calendar are pretty much LAN events, which is awesome. That's something that we're going to get the hierarchy once again established of who can perform in front of a crowd and who is just an onliner. So that's, in turn with what Tomi said, we're going to see from the major, hopefully, some of the teams that maybe didn't have the best, online showings show that they don't crack under pressure. And then I think that's kind of that's the purest form of competition, and it's something we all want. And on the flip side of it, I was thinking about how this should lead to more people getting interested in Counter-Strike again, because viewership numbers on some recent events haven't been that great, and I would think that the major would be better. And if it can rival numbers like Worlds or TI even remotely, then Counter-Strike is back in a good place.
I will just say, like, the key word there, the operative word was remotely, because, by the way, like, Worlds gets, like, sometimes I think they claim it gets, like, 5 billion viewers, and I think TI gets, like, close to 2 billion or around that, something. So I wouldn't hold out your hopes for that. All that needs to be said in CSGO is they used to brag every major, like, we broke the record, and then when Twitch did that thing where they were like, we're going to sort of remove, like, basic view botting, suddenly the record went down, like, a few 100,000, and they were like, we broke it again, and I was like, I'm sure that number was bigger, like, 3 majors ago, and everyone in the TO side was like, what do you mean? We were always at war with these stages. Like, so yeah, you know how it is. You know how the fucking industry is, mate. I know. Exactly. What's your take on this, Tomi?
So obviously excited to have like real tournament Counter-Strike again. I think it's been very hard over the course of the last like 6-12 months sometimes to be like very excited about yet another online tournament, particularly when results have sort of started diverging more and more from like what you remembered as being like where a team stood at the end of offline play, because the more you kind of start doubting of like, well, like, is this actually legitimate, or if it just like, teams that can never actually convert to playing the same way on LAN, playing the same way, performing the same way. The one thing that I would say that I think is meaningful, that I think people sometimes don't appreciate enough, is that LAN today is actually not that different from online, in the sense that like you don't really get to play like true LAN until you get to the stages.
Yes,
because the way the tournaments work today is that you fly to some other country, you have a hotel room that's your own like 24/7 home, as if you're at a boot camp or your own bedroom, just good computers, good internet, you're playing on LAN all day. Like, you could not be more adjusted to that setting. And, you know, whether you play from the rooms, as they did in Cologne, for example, or if they play from like an actual studio type environment, like, you still get there very early. You have all the time in the world to warm up, etc. It's not like you have your 10 minutes to get everything ready and you're just live. So, and you get to play all day every day if that's your thing, which historically I think used to be one of the things that was harder for people who didn't have a lot of experience playing on LAN, was sort of like being able to perform without insane amounts of warm up, which you might do at home. So I think the difference, like on an individual level, is not as great as it is, but obviously like the big thing for me is always that like you just can't prepare the same way for like an online tournament. You cannot play the same way in an online tournament. Like, you can't muster the same amount of energy, the same amount of like focus to your preparation, the same amount of interest in that. And the end result is always that the product is worse. Players are not putting in the same amount of effort. You never know like what the tournament is that everybody's excited about. Usually doesn't line up unless it is like a major. Now you know that everybody's going to be like fully prepared and focused on the same event. Like, when you play year round for these things, like, you know, somebody might have like a wedding to go to the day before and like,
Yes.
you know, ruins the team's practice, and they're like, whatever, there's the next online tournament next week. And like, then teams prioritize different tournaments differently because it's all just like same kind of online bullshit. But, you know, if it's a major, you know, everybody's putting their best foot forward. So you actually get to find out how good people truly are when they put in the work.
Yeah, you would get a lot of online peeking from random teams. Just like Gambit, when Gambit got number one, it was just like they're just trying so much harder than every team, because who really cares about IEM Spring or whatever the hell the tournament was, you know? Yeah, so that's a very valid point, because yeah, like you said, I mean,
Sometimes
the
it's
stakes
fixed.
are just higher.
Sometimes it's fixed.
Yeah.
One thing I would say, I actually echo what lurppis just said there. There's another thing people don't take into account when they talk about the old great players. Basically, almost anyone in 1.6. We didn't have warm-up PCs. There's definitely not a PC in your fucking room. And at that point in time, even though the best laptop in the world at the end of 1.6 would have run CS 1.6, nobody had those. Like, they had the bog standard laptop that came from the sponsor. So there were people don't get it. You would fly to like Asia, basically be in your hotel room for 2 or 3 days, do a media day maybe, and then go and play the event just cold. You're just going at 9 a.m. and play your first game. Like, there's even a really old school example that I know was insane, which is that back in some of the days in like the 1v1 games, it was like that. I remember the story where this guy told me, just because of where he was in the bracket, he didn't play till day 3. And he said between the travel and when he got there, he was like, fuck, I'm about like half as good. This is ridiculous. I was wrecking everyone when I was in my boot camp like 2 weeks ago, you know? So like, yeah, that's one thing definitely. In the modern day, if people don't know, you get like boot camp rooms, you have a practice area all times. Like, people can essentially, like, they're almost like true sportsmen, you know? You can sort of get yourself tuned up like you would with hitting practice in tennis, etc., and kind of get yourself sort of just about taking over when the game goes live. The other thing I would say is this. One thing that is going to be cool, this is the way I'm going to frame it, about all these big lands coming at the end of the year after so few lands, is this reminds me actually of when lurppis first became a pro. Because back in those days, basically, even the best teams in the world would only go to, let's say, 6 lands in a year, maybe 8 tops. Whereas, for example, if you remember the period that burned out Astralis at the end of 2019, it was where they did something mental like 8 lands in like 2.5 months or something insane. So what that means in the modern day is it's actually, even though the sample size is bigger, that makes it a little bit more forgiving. Like, you can have a bad LAN and then play another LAN next week and be good. You can have a couple of LANs where you struggle, but then you kick into gear on your 4th LAN. If you go to the 2 big LANs that take place over a 3 or 4 month span in lurppis' era and you fail, good luck. Like, you have to go to the bottom of the ladder, you're probably kicked, you have to start all the way over again, and you have to build up a new, like, sort of credit debit of fucking goodwill, as it were, people believing in you. So what this will actually show, as fucked as it sounds, is who either is already just good on LAN or who is naturally good on LAN, because that's what you used to find back in the day. The choker never got second chances, they would just get kicked. Like, basically, for real, you had to just, like, hit the ground running as a pro in 1.6. You had to just be good at your LANs, or at least just like good enough they don't kick you. So I think what you'll see is a bunch of people probably will flop, but you'll also get a couple of people where you're like, fuck, it's like when Zero came along, fuck, this guy's just good immediately. Like, this is a keeper. So in some senses, it might actually sort of error correct for the fact in the online you can't really know who's that good and who's not. The other thing I was going to say was this, is actually a point on the aforementioned Gambit. I want to see with a bunch of lands, because that Cologne one was like the first one and it wasn't a true LAN, and also, let's be real, like Na'Vi can beat Gambit and there's a bunch of teams would have had a chance anyway, right? What I want to see is this, when they've had 4 or 5 lands, there isn't any excuse anymore. Like, they have to actually show me, if they are the best team in the world, that they are the best team in the world. And the reason why that's very interesting to me is because the style they showed me online, there's only 2 teams, as far as I'm concerned, in the history of Counter-Strike where ever simultaneously the best tactical team and the best team in the world, and they're both from 1.6. It wasn't, one of them's obviously Astralis in CSGO, but the other one's MTW in 1.6, right? Aside from that, typically, because it's so hard to make being really tactical work, it's actually tough. You tend to be like top 5, top 3, but you won't be the best, right? Because usually it's the team with like the loose star and the best players that's number one.
If Gambit can do it, because of the set in map pool.
If Gambit can actually do it, they have literally revolutionized Counter-Strike. Because Astralis doing it, remember, comes off the back of them being like a top team for years and years and years and years and years, doing all sorts of things. If Gambit can really just come in and within 1 year of being a LAN team, be like the best team in the world with that style, then that will be a big fucking deal. Like, I know everyone else has already given them all their flowers. That's when you should give them their flowers. Because my problem always was online, like, am I just supposed to believe like the top 5 teams to ever play CSGO came along when we exclusively play online, and they definitely do this offline? Like, I have to be skeptical of that. You have to show me it. I'm sorry.
100% agreed. The one thing that I was just pointing is, I think the reason that it's hard to your point, be the very best if you're super tactical is, like, it's just, there's just not enough hours in the day. There's not enough like brain capacity for most players. That you could be like super tactical in 7 maps at once, even 6 maps, even if you have a permaban. Like, it's just too much. Like, usually what you can get out of players is you can be like very, very good and comfortable on like 3 maps, or like very good on 2 maps, and then like pretty passable on like couple more where you have a chance against like similar level teams. And then usually there's a map that you'd really want to avoid besides like a permaban, or like 2 maps you don't really like playing. And it'll vary over time, but like it just gets, that's why the cheat code is sticking together with the same core for a very long time. And that's how you kind of get around the issue, like in the Astralis case.
Yes. Right, we'll go on then. Right, my point for good, I actually have some pretty tame ones this time. I'm not going that hard, boys. So I just picked something. I was looking through what's good to me. I actually thought this was a good angle. Heroic made the Blast finals. Like, they're a team I find one of the best teams to watch in the game. I like the roster. I think it's pretty well constructed. They're a great team, as an example, by the way, of a team that made good upgrades at the right positions. They have a well-rounded squad. I don't give a flying fuck about how they performed in IEM4, because they were already at the major anyway, and I don't think they gave a shit in those decider games, unfortunately, and it looked like they just phoned it in and just lost. So I still do think they're one of the best teams. This is a team that really does, I don't know about on land necessarily as much, but they have the chance to go and be a top 4 team again and be a contender. So it's just, I'm just glad to see them back in the mix. They are one of the teams I actually don't think necessarily needs roster moves. I think is a good squad. So I know it's just a minor detail, but obviously I want to see them at the big lands, and they made the Blast finals.
If Heroic didn't have the drama surrounding them, I think they'd be one of the most likable teams flat out. Like, their play style is excellent. You're never watching them and thinking that there's no weak link. There's just no weak link on this team. Like, the worst player statistically, I think, was Shush, maybe, and he's really good. Or sometimes it's Tessus is the worst statistically. Like, all of these players are very good. Like, no one's gonna say Tessus is a bad player. And so, yeah, it's just been it's left everybody with a bad taste in their mouths because of the whole Heroic drama. And take what you will from the video that they released, but some of this stuff is pretty sketchy. Like, frankly, like the Tessus boosting thing is still, like, that rubs me the wrong way completely. Like, I don't know how he just kind of says that's like he got.
Some of this is coming later. I'll just let you know. Some of this is coming later.
Okay. Then we can talk about it later.
Yeah,
but either way, like, yeah, I think another thing is that for the Blast Fall Finals in particular, it's in Copenhagen. There's a lot of Danish people there. It's going to lead to a really sick audience. Like, there are 4 teams of the 8 at the Fall Finals that have some Danish representation. So there's a lot to get excited for if you're going to that event.
It's it's going to be really interesting to see actually like what the fan base in Denmark now thinks after Astralis kind of has been shuffling the roster for a while in anticipation of like first the device move and then like these other changes that are going to be happening at the end of the year. Because the one blast event in Copenhagen that I went to where Duncan was too, if you recall, Duncan, every single Astralis jersey was sold out. Everybody in the audience had an Astralis jersey or T-shirt or some other piece of merchandise, and nobody had bought anything for North, which at the time was like a legitimate good team, and Denmark's second best team, and sometimes even beat Astralis.
Yeah.
It's just like Astralis is just like mibr branding wise in that country, and like nobody cared about any of the other ones. So I'm actually curious to see. But on Heroic more specifically, I mean, they're just a very good team, and I think but to me, the most like interesting thing about them was like how they managed to stay so good, not over like the allegations, whatever, but like when they made the roster changes, because that seemed like the kind of place where, you know, you kind of build a pretty good team, then you make a couple of changes and it doesn't seem to have any impact on you. They've just clearly built like a system that works. They don't play like a boring, simple style of Counter-Strike or anything. To your point, like they play smart Counter-Strike. They're a fun team to watch, and they've been performing very consistently and very well. So that's actually a team, to Duncan's point from earlier, that I hope that we get to see on the stage, because I want to see how some of those players react, because I don't think they've ever really played on a big stage before.
Just to remark on how much of a household name Astralis is in Copenhagen. So it was my first time there in the last month working for Blast, and there were people that just knew Counter-Strike. Like when we walked around Copenhagen, people would recognize Launders, Scrawny, other Blast people, and be like, they would know Blast. Like people at bars would just know who these people are. And also there were just tons of people wearing Astralis gear out in public. There's this part of Copenhagen called Christiania, which is basically like a autonomous zone where people just like smoke weed and drink publicly. Like, and it feels so different from the rest of Copenhagen.
Decriminalized if people don't know yet.
Yeah, it's decriminalized.
So in California, just no weather.
Yeah, it's right. And it feels like Berkeley kind of to me, actually. But either way, it's basically like people were wearing Astralis gear there, just smoking weed. I was like, what? This is so, you never like. Maybe you see some of in LA, you'll see some like TSM gear, Cloud9 gear occasionally when you're out, but it was all Astralis when I was there. It was shocking that it's such a Counter-Strike area.
That makes absolute sense, though, that the degenerates and the homeless wear Astralis gear. So you set me up for that one, Chase. So, okay, right, let's move on. That ends the good portion of the show. Now we move to the bad. And by the way, just buckle up. As I alluded to already, like, Mauisnake doesn't need to just slip in side comments about maybe if people cheated. That will be entirely discussed. So, Tomi, what is your bad point that you've brought to the show?
My bad point is ESIC, not just like this.
Just as an entity, just ESIC itself. Like, okay.
I mean, just like what they've done.
Bold.
So, first of all, I have met the person who runs ESIC, the commission or whatever his title is.
Smith,
seems like a good guy. On the other hand, like the problem with the whole entity, regulator, or whatever they're perceived to be, is that their funding depends on all the people who have to rely on them not finding out anything. No, like nobody loses out on as much as all the tournament organizers. If there's like a huge scandal that like people are cheating and like all this stuff, nobody gets hurt as much. And they happen to be the people who fund the organization. We can disagree over or agree on, argue over what was said in the report about this specific thing. But like, first of all, it just took way too long to get to the answer. Like if anybody actually took any of this seriously at all, they would have just said like, listen, we're going to need a couple extra K to hire a couple other people, go to some law firm and get an actual answer. If somebody actually cared about whether these guys were cheating or whether Hunden was cheating or who knew about it, there would have been more funding for it, and we would have gotten the answer much sooner. I think it's completely unforgivable and unacceptable that it took this long. And I get it. It's in nobody's best interest except that of the other players, who surprisingly are completely quiet about this in public and are not speaking out about it at all. They're the ones who suffer, not really anybody else. But the fact that we still pretend that like, and the community at large pretends like this is like some serious regulator, and like if they say it didn't happen, it didn't happen. It's just like an absolute fucking joke. If somebody cared about whether people were cheating, this would have been solved months ago, because we would have just raised the money to find out the answer. No one wants to know the answer. So that's why it's one guy and whoever else helps there not
Right.
finding an answer.
Here's the thing, Mauisnake. Again, I'll have to just prep you here. There's more to come. So let's keep this mainly on ESIC specifically,
Sure.
not the heroic case and the details. Yeah, that's how fucking raw it's been. Basically, lurppis woke up, just did chose violence today, mate. So, right. On the ESIC topic specifically, one thing I'll just say is this, along the lines of what you were saying there, because that's actually an angle that we talked about on the Know It All show, but I think a lot of people have missed. Lurppis made this point that basically the only logical person who should fund ESIC is the CSPPA / the players themselves. Because the only people who actually as a group should be outraged about potential cheating are the other pro players that are getting cheated. Because as he pointed out, the tournament organizer definitely doesn't want to believe there's any cheating at their tournament. The game dev, I can tell you, I've talked to them in person. They just refuse the idea you can cheat in any way. And then basically, most other bodies, fans don't want them to be cheaters. The press don't want to be like, actually, no one
Even the
wants them to be
teams,
cheating.
even the teams doesn't want there to be cheating news.
Oh, of
That's
course
negative
not.
to the teams.
Yeah, they don't want their players to have cheated, and all other people out there.
Not even
might have
other
signed.
players.
So here's the thing, right? There's a great quote. You'll have heard some version of it. I thought I would bring up here because it's a classic one that applies to the situation. It goes, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it." Basically, the premise, I agree, Lurppis, is like, if you look at who's paying and who all the people making the demands are, the ideal scenario is that every time they go, wasn't quite enough evidence, we're not going to do a strong ruling here. It's actually not the other way around like people think, like some salacious TMZ, oh, everyone's guilty. Like, that would actually be terrible for the scene. So actually, in some fucked way, I also think, add this in. The thing I always had my skepticism about the Ian Smith guy is, I've watched a bunch of his interviews. This guy is way too milquetoast to be the leader of what essentially should be an inquisition, a force that is supposed to determine if you are guilty on some really deep level and then punish you heavily if so. Like, the problem is, right, the kind of people you want to do that role, like Richard Lewis, don't want to do that role and would never fucking sign up to do it. So it means you'll end up with people where they're just some bloody politician who's going to go, well, we're taking a firm stand and there's been an inquiry into the situation. The evidence wasn't conclusive and we'll be giving them a slap on the wrist. Like, no one fucking wants that. If there's one thing people hate in the modern day, it's that that's what fucking everything is. It's all optics. It's all like seeming like you did what you were supposed to do and then not doing it. So I have to say, like, on the one hand, it's like ESIC once tried with some of the bands to go, right, we'll really fucking lay down the law. And then people were like, wait a minute, so this guy's just banned for like 7 majors. Like, that seems like too much. Like, oh shit, my bad, pull back. And now it's just, everything's just like, well, we can't fucking kill him, so you've already served your ban, I guess. You know, what do you think on this topic, Mauisnake?
Yeah, I agree that the Ian guy does seem pretty timid. If I were to nominate anybody, I would probably nominate the M&M's reporter that's in North America, because that guy perpetually seems like he has a stick up his ass in the most pragmatic way possible.
You should do for these topics, though. Yeah, you got to be a nutter. You got to really, basically, you got to hate cheating to really want to go day and night, right? Yeah.
He hates everything that's unprofessional about the scene, like constantly. So I would put him up there first. And also, yeah, on top of it, I think the whole thing with ESIC also is just like Tomi said, it's just they take so long. Like when they had that registrar, I kept like looking at it, whether it was updated, these tickets that are active, and it's like 3 weeks and nothing changes on it. It just seems like nothing ever happens, and like every decision just comes like so long after anybody's even excited about what's going on with these issues. It's seriously, it's just like, oh yeah, shit, that happened, right? Like, okay, we'll like rewind our brains like 6 months to think about this match fixing issue that no one's even talking about anymore. Like the NA stuff in particular is just, oh man, it still hasn't even come out yet. Like what, I don't know what's even going on over there in that regard.
I'll also say as well, like I will say I am treaded into like legal grounds that I don't know well enough, but I also do think, and I know Richard's slowly coming around to this position because he's seen that ESIC unfortunately is going to take a long time and then they're probably going to err on the side of caution each time and not ban people. I also personally feel like the premise of ESIC being the governing body, I mean, who the fuck are they, by the way, to be the government? Who are you? You just walk in the scene and say, you're in charge, you're the police now. I forget when we elected you, mate, but okay, right? That premise is only based on the idea that they are efficacious, that they know what the fuck they're doing, that they actually get results. So I have to say this, right? I personally think if you're the TOs, again, unfortunately, they don't really want people to be cheating either, but if you were a TO who actually doesn't want cheating, I don't think you need a court level standard of evidence to find someone guilty. I think if you find scenarios where people semi-admit it, or they just basically every element of circumstantial evidence looks like they did it, you as a TO, as far as I'm concerned, are absolutely within your rights to say, I choose not to invite you to a bunch of my events for 6 months. So essentially, I'm not ESIC, but I'm going to give you my own little sort of soft ban and say, if you fuck around in this way, that's what I'll do to you. I can't nail you. Now, that's why I say legal grounds. Like, in theory, you could there might be a world where you can do some sort of court case against them. I don't imagine it would happen personally. So I actually feel like that whole thing's gradually, I feel like people were in on ESIC when the coach ban stuff happened initially, but I know I'm sort of getting to the point where it's like, this just feels like a bunch of fucking circus shit now. What is this?
I have one more group that should care if the matches are legitimate, and that's bettors also. I think
yes.
If the betting sites funneled some of their profits into ESIC, then the games would be better. More people would be probably willing to bet in the long run. Because if it becomes systematic, or if everybody starts cheating, or there's ways to cheat, and all the bettors are getting scammed out of their money, or even worse, like bet sites have to return money to bettors that lost in the future, then it would be in their best interest also to at least give something to make sure that there's integrity in the games that are being played out.
I agree, though the piece that you said, actually depending on, I don't know the legal side of this, which I think is the key distinction, but if there is a chance that you have to actually give away money in the back and go through this whole process, then I think the betting sites don't want it.
They
don't want cheating in the future. I don't think they want to go through their books and figure out who they have to refund and how do they get money back from the people who they accidentally paid out. But
I do think though his angle,
that would be one of the ways to funnel funds there. I agree.
Here's the thing though, obviously the key thing is that, let's be real, I'll just say it, there are betting sites that themselves are involved with using corruption and all the rest of it, and part of the cheat. So here's the thing, I think it would be a clever way to make the really legit sites with all the licenses, if they basically could use this as their way of showing that they have a commitment to integrity essentially, and let's say the 3 or 4 really big sites, they all agreed to as a little group, they put an X amount of money towards it. Yeah, that would be a good way to sort of try and say to
someone should pay you for their marketing.
Not bad, eh?
Good marketing campaign.
How much DJT should they throw at ESIC?
There you go. Problem is this show isn't sponsored by that, so you know what? They don't buy my whole soul.
Well, you probably double their annual budget with a not very meaningful donation.
Well, I think Ian should get on GamerSup so he does more work, honestly.
There you go. Now that's a good idea. That'd get his fucking thought processes going quickly. He wouldn't have that crash after half an hour like certain shit, drinks named after animals, and also it's sugar free, so he wouldn't get a little sugar rush.
Wake him up with some guacamole.
Because let's be real, when I look at that guy, he's one of those fuckers that probably has the palate of a fucking 6-year-old child. You just give him some really fucking Sunny D, he'd probably be off his tits when he goes, oh my god, what are we doing now? Anyone got any X? Fucking hell, get the strippers out. Mate, he looks like he spent his whole life doing someone's fucking accounts in a back room somewhere. That's why it's so ridiculous he's the face of it. Listen, I want him to be in ESIC, but he could be the PA or something. I want the guy who's in ESIC, the head guy, to be some firebrand motherfucker who's I will not accept corruption in this industry. We will root out all the people. This guy's more here's the thing, I actually wish on some level he was like what Hunden originally claimed. You know what Hunden claimed? He was and he said, and if you dare to challenge this and appeal it, I will ban you for 5 years. That guy sounded sick. He sounded like some Torquemada level motherfucker. Yeah, get that guy. Unfortunately, that guy doesn't exist. That was just Hunden mistelling the story. Because Hunden's an idiot and be a liar. So okay, we'll move on now and briefly exit the world of destroying everything to do with heroic and easy. It's how I cleverly Mauisnake. This is how I've done these shows before. I awkwardly balanced in a pro-heroic point as my good, just because I knew what was coming. So, okay, right. Now we'll go to your bad point. What is your bad point?
My bad is just about Adrenaline Liquid and the fact that obviously from a life perspective, it's fine. He's going to watch his kid get born. You can't fault him for that. But Liquid finally felt like they were getting things together in terms of playing as a team and their structure is starting to work out for them. I feel like from the eye test when we saw it at, I think, Cologne or maybe Pro League, it was okay, they're incrementally getting better. The results aren't necessarily showing it, but at the showdown, it was very obvious that they were a cut above everybody that they played. So to not have their coach is obviously going to be a big hit for them. And for the one real North American representative team, because I'm not counting EG here, it's really a shame to see the backbone of their roster just not be there, because people said like before Adren wouldn't call timeouts or like something like I don't know where that. I mean, maybe that happened 2-3 years ago, but at the showdown, he called the timeout against VP on every map, and they almost used all 4 timeouts. And after every timeout, they won. They pretty much always won after timeouts, and
that's probably where Reddit, if you notice, Reddit just repeats the same things over and over. By the way, that was true when they were in like the 2019 Grand Slam. They definitely never called fucking timeouts ever, but that was years ago at this point in time, of course.
And if you're winning a Grand Slam and you're not calling timeouts, I'm gonna forgive it. So
no, but I mean, he also did it when they were just getting banged by Australians like every game after that, and he used to just sit there going. And my joke was, it's like he would sit there and he'd get so enthralled in the game. He thought he was a fan. He'd be like, "Wow, they're really fucking him up here. Like, holy shit, they should probably do something." Oh wait, it's me. I'm the cool fuck. You know,
it's like Phil Jackson just saying like the guys will have to figure it out without a timeout. Only like 2 years later, they're like, "Well, they're still figuring it out."
Well, the joke there is, obviously, Phil Jackson's teams did figure it out. It's like if he'd just done that and then they never figured it out and just lost all the championships. Like, oh, shit, fuck yeah. I should probably get off my ass and help them figure it out. By the way, I will say as well, Mauisnake sort of killed my joke there, because when he was talking about that, I was going to say, well, you didn't expect him to really take a time out of his child's own birth and miss it, did you? No, logically he'd never do that, would he? And then the other joke I was going to make was also related to that. Since we're back online, I'll say it's connected, since it was back when they used to have LANs, boys. So the other joke would be, now what's Elige going to do? He's going to turn around at a LAN and go, who's going to call a timeout? And then look at the empty chair of Adren and go, it's not quite the same when he's not here to not call it though, is it? There you go. You've ruined all those jokes, but whatever. If everyone can rewind the clock and pretend they didn't listen to what Mauisnake said, those are all fire. It's all great material. Oh, by the way, it's apparently 2 years out of date now, which for me, it's not bad. If exists coming back as a coach, I'd probably bring up some shit about his vetoes from about 8 years ago.
That's also bad news. That's also
I know, exactly. But luckily, that came out before we had a chance to change our point. So, do you have any thoughts on this one, Tommy?
I actually thought this was going to a darker place at first when I heard the beginning of it. I was a little concerned where we were going to go with it. I mean, look, it always sucks when you don't get teams at their full roster or like full strength for any reason, really. We talked about earlier how it's important to get these like flagship events where everybody's putting their best foot forward, and it's going to be impossible, frankly, for Liquid now to be at like full 100%. I think there's just like no way it's going to have an impact. It's just a question of how meaningful is the impact. It sucks, and I guess I don't really buy into the whole like patriotic thing. Also not American. Contrary to what many fans today believe.
True.
But for Americans, obviously, like, it sucks. There's not going to be a lot of hope there. And by the way, 40% of Liquid is not American.
True. I will say, one of the things I do find actually sucks about this is I actually had Liquid as one of my potential dark horses, because look how many of the players are land proven. They look like his style would even work better offline. So I will say that does actually, like, it dampens a little bit my excitement for them doing some like super deep semi-final run or making them like, I actually think as a result, like, I'm probably going to go with my old one, which is man's always been VP for the last few months. That's kind of like the one I think low key could just surprise on LAN. So I'll say, yeah, it sucks. Obviously, you want your coach there, especially if he's been here now, plenty of time. It's not like he's brand new. Most was removed many months ago at this point in time. So if you look online as well, they've been given a lot of good performances. Sure, some of them are like, it's a good performance and a loss, but like that's that becomes a win on LAN when the other players aren't as good. Like, I actually think they had a legit chance to be a dark horse and run far. Like, here's my point for bad. You're not going to expect this angle, actually, but I actually picked, it's going to be the fall of Extremum. Because when they made that project, obviously they were, whereas JKS left and went to call, the others didn't disperse. They kept the team together. They brought in Bentet to replace JKS. They had this big org lined up that actually seems like they gave them the full support. They had all those months where they were just playing like shit and nobody cops, and everyone was waiting, like, when they're actually going to play for real, when they're going to be back. And then when they've finally had this little spurt of playing in a bunch of the tournaments, it's just fallen flat completely. And it's like you watch it and now the story is they're just all benched. So you just think of these guys' careers. Like, this could have gone so many other ways that were all better. Like, first of all, how about a world where JKS doesn't go to call? What if instead actually he stays with this project? What about the world where Jacob joins Cloud9, which he had an offer for, but he chose not to do this project? What about in the world where they never picked up by 100 Thieves, so 100 Thieves doesn't drop them less than a year later? Like, there's so many different... I'm sure they probably had different orgs they could have gone with instead of this one. Like, this one, by the way, if you know esports history, and lurppis might be able to back me up on this, this one screamed to me like newer org and they're willing to spend money, but those are always the most dangerous ones. Those are the ones that bail after 6 months, 9 months, a year. Those are the ones that aren't going to be here in 10 years. Sometimes you are better taking the lower salary offer from the org that's like SK Gaming, Evil, like they've been here forever. They're probably going to be here another 10 years, you know. So I actually just think the whole way this was handled, the results, the fact that they have good players, like they had this core that had been together for so long, it's all just so underwhelming. It's so disappointing. Like I really thought, especially the fact that they obviously compete traditionally in NA, this core, there was times where they were very good in the world. And there was times where you really looked like, wow, the future's so bright. There's no future now. This is just depressing.
Well, I mean, you can even go further back on this, because remember in 2019 when they were actually sort of at their peak as Renegades, that's when Gratis Faction had like visa issues and they missed a bunch of tournaments, and like there were like months when they couldn't play, I think like leading up to the major, which was then the first one where they did better. And I think they beat ENCE maybe at the Berlin major then. But like, you know, like they've had a bunch of like bad luck things go against them, and that was like an interesting core. That was like a, you know, they didn't have like any like clear superstar players. They were just like good. It was just like a good group of players together. Fully agreed on like the characterization of the organization just based on like there not really being much history, etc. Curious to see whether they're going to be picking up another team or whether they're going to be planning on staying in CS. Because I do think if you just kind of look at, again, like you go back to the rankings for a second, there's just a lot of organizations that are pushing on like at least like interesting CS teams. You know, like even going back to IEM Fall, like Copenhagen Flames, like that's like a pretty third tier, fourth tier organization if you think on a global scale. But like they've got a pretty good team now, and it's I think it's gotten to the point, to our earlier talent distribution conversation, where like you can't really buy like a solid Counter-Strike roster and know what you're getting.
Yes.
There's just like too many factors going against it, and that makes it really hard to be a Counter-Strike team if you're not in any of these leagues. Like if you're not in like BLAST or EPL, etc., where you have some guaranteed participation, something that you can kind of like structure your calendar and your business around to a lesser extent, I think it becomes really hard to kind of justify it. And you know, that's always been sort of the knock on like the open circuit. The other one being that like an open circuit with some limitations would probably be great. It's that we have like 10 TOs replicating the cost basis where things just don't really work for anybody, as opposed to something a little bit more centralized or limited. But that's what happens when one party controls 2/3 of the market.
I'd say just more, I mean, in regards to Extremum, it's kind of weird that if they just played in the Oceania region, they would have probably made it through the RMR.
Probably, yeah.
That's like the whole fate of the team just fell because they decided to play in the harder NA qualifier, which you can't really blame them because they had these points. So, but it's like if you actually just went back to Australia, I know there's visa issues and it's like impossible to go back there and stuff. But if they did and they could, they would be playing, they'd be a roster still. And as for Extremum as an org, it was pretty clear that they were trying to put forward a really good foot in terms of content and making sure that they had enough kind of like personal interest, human interest kind of little videos that I actually watched a handful of them that are like 10 questions with Liaz about who he is. And it's like, wow, the production quality on this is way too good to have 1,000 views. And it's kind of, it's weird because honestly, human interest stuff usually does better than just highlights or game stuff. But I think because Extremum was doing so poorly like when they were in Europe, that there's just not a lot to be excited about. Like, why am I watching this player that's on the 50th best team talk about stuff? Even though we know that he is not like a 50th best player caliber like team or anything like that. It's just they were really just kind of doing too badly for too long, and the online era was obviously not kind to them. And I'm surprised they never got it together, because you would think on paper Bentet for JKS and keeping the rest of the four is fire. You'd think that's like amazing, but it just felt like they just never, I don't know, they just never could put the pieces together. I watched a couple of their games, and it just like they'd be kind of like flat and one-dimensional, and it was just never like, it never felt like they were doing multiple, like it was always like very obvious to read their game, I'd say.
The other thing as well I'll throw in is I also do have a lot of sympathy for those players because they already used to have to basically permanently live in North America despite being Australian and do the most mental trips back home for visas and passport renewals. But on top of that, during this online era, I imagine they have had the hardest time of any fucking group of people, especially with, as you allude to, their entire country locking down, etc. And basically you can't go back or it's hard to and you have to get on a list, etc. Because for people who don't realise, just think about how much crying you've heard from NA pros who have to go to Europe every 3 months. These guys just permanently had to live in North America. So like I have so much sympathy for their plight. The problem is this is a results-based business. And if you don't get a result, people essentially, they might care in sentiment, but they don't give a fuck in what it means. Like, for example, you won't have a job anymore, you won't have a salary anymore. And in this particular situation, I could see a couple of the players getting picked up if they're willing to split off. But I think the idea this stays together as a team, like who the fuck would invest in this project? I'm sorry. I just don't know who would at this point.
Well, I mean, the other thing that we didn't talk about that was, I think, challenging for them is I don't think they ever actually went to Europe with this roster this year because of like all the travel issues and everything.
They played in a lot of like the online Europe Cups, so I think they were in Serbia. If I had to guess, I don't know how they would play those other.
I mean, Kassad's the coach, so I think they might have boot camped there or something, or been there at some point.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot. I thought they were just playing like the North American. Okay, then that's less forgivable because I thought they were just kind of like stuck in one place. But if they actually got the good practice and everything and still couldn't make anything out of, then yeah, I retract my point.
It's all right.
They lost a lot of cups in like last place.
They lost a lot of the silly online cups, basically. Yeah, that was what killed the hype before they even began. Right, so let's get...
kills you. That kills you.
Yeah.
Let's go then to the ugly point. So people might guess we've sort of held back on some aspects. What is the ugly point that you would like to discuss on this particular show, Tommy?
I think it's absolutely unbelievable that the heroic players literally on their own video that was published on their own terms admitted that they covered up their coach cheating and said, please don't cheat anymore. And everybody's just like, it's fine. Like, what were they going to do? Like, what, they're supposed to like give up their coach? Like, how do you think that is? Like, are you fucking kidding me now? Like, this reminds me of an old story that Duncan remembers, where my team was playing against SK at the time, was Forest and Get, right? In like an online game. And we're doing like the ping check before the game. And what basically was the result was we should play on a Finnish server because Swedish internet was so much better that we'd have like 5 lower ping, but it was closer to the same. And the SK guys basically said like, okay, well, like, we're just not playing there. And the admin was like, well, we kind of like Forest and Get, right? We're fans, so you're going to play on their server, even though it's against the rules. And the reason I say that is why this will never change, because those guys have more fans. And like, no matter what, like somebody from ESIC says what I say, those are the players that people want to watch play. And every single fan who sees complaints about them is going to say like, well, like, sure, it wasn't great, but also like, how much would it suck if they banned them? We wouldn't get to see them play. And I think it's ultimately a popularity context plus the stuff that we talked about earlier. And like, I just think it's unbelievable that everybody's glossing over this publicly. I know privately there's very many people who are very pissed off, who are holding back and are not speaking about it. Players, people in the organizations, other people in the industry. But for some reason, people are just like unwilling to talk about it publicly. And I think it's so fucking ridiculous that these guys literally admitted to knowing he cheated, hid it for like a year, however long it's been, year and a half, and nothing comes out of it. Like, it's fine. It's fine. Everybody would have done the same.
It is like, it's obviously just so bad. It is so bad. Yeah, it's something that I noticed too when I was watching it. There's another, like, that happened. And then also my take on it is like Tessus definitely knew he was cheating when he boosted that guy. Like, because the way they like do the boost, and then it's like he has to boost him, and then while Hunden's there, he has to type .coach or whatever. I thought it was like it's a boost, and then you do some like reconnecting, like in terms of how they showed how it all works. Like, what? So you're boosting him. You're explaining that you boosted him, and you think it's a harmless boost, but he suddenly reconnects and does .coach after doing that. Like, it's just you cheated. You just know you did. Like, so it's not even just Tessus knowingly did it. It's that they all knew they did it after that video came out. And that's just, yeah, it's just terrible. It's really terrible. It's really terrible that because they don't have proof that they knew, even though they kind of said they knew, that they don't get they just get a slap on the wrist. Even that, it's not even a slap on the wrist, actually. They get there's no punishment at all. And I forgot who I was talking to about this, but it was kind of like a point that it would be probably better in some ways. Oh, it was Anders, actually. It was probably better if all the heroic guys did get a 6-month sentence or something. They serve some kind of punishment so that we all know that they have, like, that they have to serve a punishment. That's like what the judicial system is for. You have to serve time for committing a crime. And because they have no punishment at all, and they come up with this sob story video that we're all supposed to be like, I saw Cadian cry, so I should empathize with him. But you're knowingly cheating. Like, I don't care if you cry if you cheated. Like, that's probably like watching, some cyclists that did blood doping start crying when he gets convicted. It's just like, I have no remorse.
Caught, not
you're sad you got caught. Then yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And I mean, also, by the way, so before you go in, Duncan, because I assume you'll have some fire opinions here as well. The other thing is, like, when people say this stuff, like, like Hunden's their senior, he's like a legend in the game, like, give me a fucking break. This guy has the worst stats across all of HLTV. He's been an absolute meme in the community for the last 5 years for how bad he was. And like 2 weeks before he joined Heroic, he was cut from Mad Lions because he was so bad. And you're telling me this is like some all-time godfather figure whom you could never question? Like, give me a fucking break.
It's not Fallen. It's right.
Right, here's the main issue I have with this whole topic. Because actually, if people will know if they watch that Four Horsemen, which is like a month ago now or something, Amon and now sound very different. Because guess what? Different. Not only has different information emerged, but the framing of the evidence we had has changed for a third time. So here's the problem I have with this whole case. First of all, like I said in my tweet, I don't have the concrete evidence where I know for a fact that these players cheated or helped cheating, etc. Although I will say they've admitted it, but that technically itself is not actually concrete evidence. They could be lying. They could be lying now, by the way. They could have some reason to say so. But I'll just say what I've always said about Flusher. I don't know that Flusher cheated, but I think he cheated. I can say that. That's an absolutely perfectly legitimate statement. By the way, I think people like Shocks who walked back their statements similarly are pieces of shit. And I actually think we're morally compromised because of this exact issue, that it's an unpopular opinion. People don't want to believe that players they like cheated. And even other players don't want to actually believe it. They want to believe, there's some misunderstanding. So I think what's happened in this whole case goes like this. Basically, Richard, in his pursuit of the truth, single-handedly seems to have turned the whole community to the idea that actually the players are all innocent. And it goes like this. One, Hunden has now turned out to be a way, way more morally and ethically compromised individual than we even knew. So he's the main villain. And if you know how the power dynamic works, you send all your hate and your psychic projection and you vent it all on Hunden, right? He's the ultimate piece of shit. He's the bad guy. He's the fucking guy. He was the one at the end, he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those meddling kids at ESIC. Like, he's the one who's the bad guy, right? But the problem with that is we're making it he's the bad guy and everyone else is good. Then add in that he essentially socially manipulated Nico into making one of the pieces of evidence. Well, yes, we all feel sympathy for Nico and we all think that's a horrible situation. Doesn't change what you guys have just said, that the players themselves have admitted that they knew there was cheating involved. Now, the fact you feel sorry for Nico doesn't make that cool, that they're just staying silent on it all. And what the fuck, by the way, does that have to do with all the people not called Nico? Then the third detail is this. The Tesses angle was the idea that all he had was a server log that they'd gone and done the boosts, right? Well, obviously, you can't fucking find anything from that. Like, they're not having a conversation like, right, you boost me, dude, so I can cheat. Yes, I will, sir. Like, there's no real evidence there, right? So the problem is this. If you just say that out loud, like, oh, he boosted him into a spot and then Hunden later cheated from that spot, like, it isn't how Mauisnake just characterized it. It sounds like Hunden just goes, hey, Tesses, I've got a cool boost and you're going to be the guy who boosts him in the server, so come here and I'm going to boost you and you're going to throw smoke. Now, that is so different from what Mauisnake just explained, which is that it seems a lot more like the way it was done, Tesses would really have to be quite naive or just an outright fool to not know something's going on. Also, because it's not like, hey, here's a boost spot, let me see. Like, you look at the Spirit video where Hunden was glitched. It's like in the middle of catwalk in middle. Yeah. Like, nobody would ever stand on somebody's head there. Like, just give me a break. Go beggars belief. Exactly. So again, that isn't concrete evidence. basically you have to be an expert like we are about the game to know it's bullshit. But you can see why, before people really thought about it, all these details combined with the way that Richard did it, because what he wanted to do was protect Nico, and he wanted to show how bad Hunter was. I think it's basically made everyone, black and white, hop from fuck everyone in Heroic to just fuck Hunter and the Org a bit, but the others are all innocent, right? They aren't innocent, as far as we can tell. Like, everything they have now since said actually is essentially sort of like, right, we'll admit it a little bit because we know we're not being punished, and that's the end of it, right? We can just get away with it. Like, they have just got away with cheating. But here's what's crazy. I'll give you some historical precedents, right? So every fucking stupid fan at the time and for half a decade since has told me that the ultimate crime of Fnatic with the infamous Olaf boost is that when they found the boost on YouTube, they didn't immediately contact Valve and tell them the boost existed, right? Anyone who even thinks that doesn't know Pro Counter-Strike. You don't fucking go with a straight fire boost to Valve and go, can I use this? And then risk them telling everyone. Like, that isn't what you do. Now, it's true, the game breaking element, which as far as I can tell was unintentional, that is dodgy, right? But the idea you get a sick boost, you don't. But every fan said you should do it for competitive integrity. Then, the same fans, by the way, go the opposite way. So the same fans who talk about cheating, they were cool, by the way, with the idea Skadoodle willingly took part in a fixed match that he knew was being fixed, and their best case scenario is that he apparently afterwards, which we don't actually cannot corroborate, it's just a testimony of known liars, and he didn't receive the skins. They take that to mean, oh, he like sort of like did it, but he didn't want to do it, and he never got paid. That proves he didn't, right? First of all, he still is an accessory to a crime. Do you all know how the law works? You can't just like fucking be the like getaway driver and then go, I didn't rob the bank. Like, you're going to jail as well, mate. Maybe not for the same amount of time. Secondly, they always say, because this ties into the whole sympathy element, they always say, oh, poor Swag. Poor Swag was led into it. Swag received stolen, essentially fraudulently gained goods in exchange for committing a crime. I don't feel any sympathy for him. I feel sympathy for the length of his ban and his age, but he was an adult and he took part knowingly in a crime. Now, he can say after the fact, by the way, I didn't know and I didn't really want to do it. Then you don't accept the fucking goods, do you? You don't take the money at the end. And so my problem, the reason I'm bringing this up now, is because this is the real crux of the matter, is that the reason I will never personally think Skadoodle should have gotten away without punishment, and I do actually think he was ethically compromised, is because even if he didn't want to do it, you have a simple choice, mate. You don't play the game. You go to a journalist and you tell them. You maybe even publicly out it. You say these guys are throwing the match.
Your internet's down.
Yeah, at that point, you are not someone, if you say nothing, who hasn't done anything. You have actually, like, basically aided, in his case, directly aided evil. So in the same case, right, these players are sort of like, but, like, first of all, their angle, like you said, like, but, you know, we thought because it's Hunden, he wouldn't do it again. Right, so if Hunden murdered someone, would you go, well, he is a really cool guy, so just don't do it again, Hunden. Don't do a second murder. What are you talking about? First of all, as Lurppis said, he's no way that side of a legend figure. He has been someone very influential, but he isn't like fucking that isn't like, he's not Carrigan or fucking Glaive or Ave or someone, or Wimp, like some guys who actually were titans of Danish Counter-Strike. And secondly, that just doesn't fly with me. So I know you cheated. You're my coach, by the way. I'm going to A, allow you to coach me in the future, and B, I'm not going to ever tell anyone, including, I'm not even going to back channel it to journalists. People don't think of that detail, mate. Think about this. You don't ever have to go public with it if you're KD and Tesses, all those guys, right? What you could do is just reach out to me or Richard or someone like that privately and just go, look, I can't say anything publicly about this, but you've got to look into it. Like, basically, we know that Hunden cheated and that he did it knowingly and that the orgs come. Like, if you do that, I still don't think you've totally cleaned your conscience, but you've at least sort of like you've got some good intentions. You do want the best for the seat. They didn't do that at all. So the idea that fans now, because of the Nico thing, as far as I can tell, and feeling sorry for them, they're now riding totally with the angle, which I'll admit I was on this bus a month ago, of it's not the player's fault at all. They couldn't have known. By the way, there were circumstances where you could not know. Like, for example, there could be a coach who was just super smart and only used it a little bit and just used it to make better calls. As far as we can tell, that is not this case, and even the players themselves are saying it. So I do think this is way more outrageous than people are implying. Like, I think on some level this is a travesty of justice.
I just like going back to what you said about, like, you know, going to journalists or something. Like, one thing that I would just point to is, like, how were these guys not concerned what was going to happen in their careers? Like, this is what they do for a living. Some of them are like 18, 19. Now they find out that their coach cheated. Like, if I'm told that, like, my coach cheated, and, like, that might also, by the way, like, if he gets caught, like, and I don't say anything, my career is probably done too. because I'm now part of the cheating ring. By the way, this is under the assumption that I didn't know before. Just saying, because that might change my actions. But like, if I find out that my coach cheated, why would I want to continue playing with that coach? Like, these guys, like, they're living, they're being able to pay for their apartment, for their car, for their food, depends upon them not being banned for something that their coach does. Why do they not at least kick the coach out? You don't have to say anything if you don't want. Say, we don't want to play with you anymore, want to get rid of you. Tell the organization there was a conflict, whatever, we're not playing with this guy anymore. You could have done that, but you didn't.
The players are definitely accessories to all of this happening, and it is inexcusable that the people kind of knew about this, it feels like, behind the scenes. Like, I've never really heard about this coach bug in North America, nor did any of the coaches I talked to know about it. It does seem like in certain circles, like in Brazil, like Brazilian coaches seem to know about it, and some European coaches knew about it, and they used it way more. That's why I don't think there was any coaches that were banned for this thing. Like, some of them knew, so you would think that there were some rumblings beneath the scenes of people knowing about this, and then for them to just kind of everybody kept it under wraps. It just makes you think that there's a greater conspiracy here regarding how many people were in on this or knew that this could have been affecting games. And I simply just can't. My biggest gripe is like, I respect Tessus so much as an individual player and his skill, but you can't just boost someone on Catwalk and then he disconnects from the server, rejoins as the coach, and not understand that something just happened because he disconnected when he was on your head, like, or he joined the coach slot when he's on your head. Like, it's so egregious.
The other thing that, like, I haven't watched the full video because I just can't put myself through that. I saw the quote and that was enough for me. I trust that was transcribed correctly. But it sounds like from the Angel TV post and the summary of the video that the game after which they found out that Hundred had used the glitch was the Astralis game. Is that you guys' understanding?
I wasn't sure about the game.
Got it. Well, it sounded like that to me from reading. So somebody can correct me on Twitter if that's not the case. But if they did find out about it after the Astralis game, because they're talking about it talks about like talks about the game and then says like there's no team speak for the Astralis game. So I mean,
it was claimed there was only 2 games that he did it in. So in theory, it has to be after the first one, right? Yeah.
So if it's after the first one, the Spirit game is after. So there's one more game, and that's the one where he was boosted on like top of Catwalk. So like what? You get caught once, and then you ask somebody for a boost, and like, hey, how about this cool boost spot on middle of Catwalk? And I'm like, oh, let me just go to coach real quick. I'm like, it's like this is like.
Tessus, I saw enough, Coach.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
I know.
Boost works, Tessus. BRB.
Unfortunately, though, like I think the worst detail, and this podcast won't change it, let's be real, like, the people have made their mind up. The worst thing is, we always say on By the Numbers, like one of our sort of principles goes like this. We can't actually stop the bad guys. Like, for example, I can publish everything I ever find out about Nicola Nyholm. He's still going to have some success because he's not trying to con me. He's trying to con the general public. In this case, sometimes even the general Danish public, not even esports people. He's going for a totally different business world. He's going for a totally different audience than me. But the one thing I can do, and Richard can do, is we can blacken his name on some level. We can at least make people vaguely aware there's something dodgy about this guy. And you see that has actually happened. That's sort of slightly seeped into the like general consciousness about who Astralis and particularly Nicola Nyholm are. In this case, it's the worst thing of all. They're not only not going to get punished, but the community vibe is actually entirely on their side now. In fact, this is where I hate the fact that ESIC took so long and that the evidence came out in a staggered way and was constantly allowed to be characterized by other people before we got to it. Because what it means is I've even myself on podcasts said things like, wow, and how incredible they were able to play so well through all of this. Well, now I don't fucking think that at all, do I? Now I think, I wonder why they were able to play well. Because they knew they fucking did it. And they were just chilling, like, you know what, fuck it, we get banned, this might be our last CS, let's go out with a blaze of glory, boys, just frag out. Like, that's not as heroic anymore. I mean, obviously pun on the name, that's not cool anymore. Also, worst named dog of all fucking time, by the way, and everyone's also cool with that, by the way. You know the story, this is a cool detail that makes the others look fucking terrible in contrast. You know the story that supposedly Borup, who obviously was caught earlier this year, actually did go to the org and basically told them, like, I will not play for a coach who cheats. By the way, That shouldn't even be a heroic act. He is just a fucking normal human being by my standards.
It'd be a baseline.
But fair play to him. Compared to them, he looks like a hero. The idea that all the others didn't, well, that proves, by the way, that you could do that potentially. And also, by the way, this is another thing you have to do. That calls into question if he was actually cut because they wanted him gone. There's a world in which maybe the org goes, oh, you didn't want to hang around with our cheater. By the way, we're bringing him back, so you're out of the team. You have to start asking questions like that. Like, that's the problem with having conflicts of interest like this. And then is everyone really cool just because the heroic org was sold with the fact the org themselves went out of their way at every level to cover up the cheating? Because the thing that really sticks in my craw is this. All those fans told me, because I made a tweet, if you remember, where I was sort of like, Cadian was like the biggest shit talker ever, and then he has nothing to say on this topic for months and months and months and months. And everyone just told me Mauisnake, because everyone on Reddit's a legal expert. They go, oh, he's probably been told by his lawyers he can't talk because there might be a court case and then it might be admissible. First of all, it's not our court. Like, they aren't bringing up tweets, you fucking moron. But secondly, oh, weirdo, the second ESIC says they're not going to be punished. They all come out with all these fucking admissions, sob stories. These motherfuckers really just stayed quiet because they knew they couldn't win by doing it. They were going to get outed at some level in the end anyway. They even thought I might just get fucking go down, so why I did and they basically just sat silently. Meanwhile, people like Cadian, go and have a look on Twitter. How much fucking drama has this guy been in over the years? How many times has he had something to say about another org? By the way, I'll tell you right now, he was one of the people calling out Flashpoint when he thought we didn't handle them correctly. Oh, it's fucking rich when you have nothing to say about you and your teammates potentially cheating, because it turns out you would have been lying if you'd have said you hadn't.
The Flashpoint thing reminds me that, like, I think it is somewhat useful context. I mean, I'm just like kind of joking, but also like, you know, kind of serious in tweeting the ranking of heroic yesterday out, where I like highlighted like the very bottom of being super far down. That was like right when the cheating took place. And
yes.
Like, you know, there is some context to it, which like we don't know like what was said, what wasn't said, but like they, like, you know, if you're performing super poorly, like, you know, we remember that, like, you know, they were supposed to have been sold to Fun Plus. That got canceled thanks to UCSPPA, cost those players a bunch of money. That deal got canceled, and Cadian posted that video where he's like walking around like Culver City, like
shirtless,
talking, and it's like, oh, like, you know, my Counter-Strike
yes,
my Counter-Strike career is over. You know, we're just trying. We want to play so hard. Did all this bullshit. And then, like, a month later, they continue performing poorly, and then all of a sudden, they start cheating. Like, that is context. It might not mean anything.
It makes it look like
there is
you'd be
like
more
some
incentivized to do it.
Like, that situation that they found themselves in.
Sure. Right. Okay, Mauisnake, what is your ugly point?
Yeah, my ugly is that it's kind of like. Okay, my ugly is that I've just noticed, and this is something that it's been pretty obvious and in everybody's faces for a while, that with CS, Valorant, like esports, sports, doesn't matter, no one really, and this is almost like bordering existential for my own existence, in that people rarely really actually care about the game. Like, honestly, like, it just doesn't, people don't really care about the details of the game that much, other than people that are getting paid to play it and the coaches. I would say that 80% plus of the fans' narratives or everything is just about what's going on outside the game, as opposed to like what's in the game. Like, I definitely got my place in this space because I focused a lot on what was happening in the game, and I kind of just think, okay, if I just keep focusing on the game and like develop just this encyclopedic knowledge of strats and like reactions and macro understanding, micro understanding in terms of players and their who they are and how they play, it would help. But it's pretty clear to me now that's just not how it works. And the majority of people, and this is like an example, like, by the numbers, the premier CS podcasts, like, you guys just don't talk that much about the matches.
Almost
like, it's kind of like, yeah, it's about the drama, it's about what's going, like, there'll be like, you guys will maybe mention like, oh, this guy played well or whatever, and that's fine. You know, it doesn't need to be in depth because people frankly don't care about that. You know, like, think of all the content creators in this space that are doing very well. Like, pretty much none of them are doing deep dive breakdowns on anything related to the game anymore. It's all just like drama, or maybe talk over the game, but honestly, like, it's talking on with game footage, but talking about something tangential. So that's something that I just notice more and more, and it's kind of true in like real sports too. I mean, if you want to like pull examples from there,
for
like
sure.
the real guys that like are grinding stuff, like Zach Lowe's approach from what he did back in 2010 is so drastically different to how he carries out his business nowadays. Like he used to go over
and he's
X's
still
and
very
O's.
different from everybody else. Like he's
Yeah,
still like way out on the other end.
Exactly. He's still like one of the nerdiest guys, but he focuses so much more on like the drama side of things than he used to. Like he came into the space as a huge nerd, and now he's like just interviewing players and talking about
He's branded himself.
storylines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think on this topic, Tommy?
I fully agree. I think I think there's a couple of reasons why that's the case now more so ever than before, but I think that obviously has always been the case. I think the big reason why I think that is maybe changing a little bit more in that direction is that Counter-Strike, like Go's been around for much longer, and there haven't been that many changes. And as a result, this is why I made that CS2 point some time ago, that I wish they just like converted it to the Source 2 engine and called it CS2, so it was actually a new release. Because the game's been around for so long that everybody's kind of played it, and there's millions of people who enjoy playing, enjoy watching, but you don't really get the new players anymore the same way. And I think it's the new players who are going to be most likely to be interested in kind of learning, over some period of time. Like there's people who watch ESPN Detail. I watch it. I assume you guys, probably both of you, watch it at times. But that's not what most people care about. They just don't. They'd rather watch like Russell Westbrook dunks than they would like Kobe talking about like the most influential Lakers playoff sequences. Like that's just the market, and it's the same. I mean, like most people just don't understand the game at like any reasonable level. And like I'll be the first one to admit, like I feel like I don't understand anything about CS:GO relative to like 1.6. Like when I watched a 1.6 game, like I knew everything that was going to happen at all times. Like you just knew everything like so far in advance. Like I feel like I know nothing now in comparison, because like I just don't play the game, so like I don't know the smokes, etc., that sort of thing. And like still 99% of the fans like wish they knew what I've forgotten in the last like 2 years. So like that's just the reality. Like the things that they can kind of get into is the competitive aspect, like whether you're winning or you're losing, and then just like the story around it, which is how our friend Duncan here has made his living for the last 2 decades.
All worked out in the end, right? All worked out. Who knew? I was actually holding on to the real fucking sleeper, or I had the real Bitcoin at $1 Mauisnake. Now it's worth whatever it's worth. I mean, the joke of this could age really badly. Maybe in 2 years it's worth nothing. So, right, here's what I would say. First of all, bad news, Mauisnake. Like a lot of people in the esports side of CSGO, you read Reddit. And if you don't realise, not only is Reddit an incredibly tiny vocal minority, if you ever use a tool, I've given this advice to so many content creators, get a tool called Reddit Enhancement Suite. It allows you to tag users, and every time they post, you will see their tag. What you will literally discover is you are not hated by 5,000 people. You are hated by 30 really mentally unwell, socially awkward lunatics who live in basements and have no social life. Some of them have posted for like 10 years about this shit, and for some bizarre reason, they have a disproportionate love of the team Mouse Sports. I don't know why that last detail is there. I'm just saying it's real. Just check it out. Go have a look. Some of them, by the way, that fans don't even notice, because I've tagged them, I've done my research. Some of them, for real, are just clearly even sock puppet accounts for people who work in big TOs. As in, I've seen people who only trash Blast, or they only trash Flashpoint, or they only defend Astralis, the org, but they do it in a way where the info they're given is slightly too much for the public to know, and the framing is exactly what that org would want if they were battling their enemy, as it were. So first of all, unfortunately, you've been gaslit by people on Reddit, because on Reddit, what people do is they're all posers. So what they do is, it's like if you had a thread, right, where it was like, what's the best book ever? They wouldn't really say what their favourite book was, Mauisnake. They would say, like, it would have to be Proust's, Reflections of Time. They probably never read that, or they've read part of it. They just know it's a great book to say if you want to sound very intellectual. So what the equivalent of that in CS, it's why every diss against me on Reddit goes, he doesn't even know the game. Even though, by the way, they themselves have never been a high-ranked player, they're a matchmaking player, they know nothing about the game. They have no objective actual basis to suggest that they could judge my knowledge. But what they all do is pretend the only thing they care about is super nerdy strat breakdown. Right. By the way, these are the same people who spent 2 years saying Yanko's boring because he has a bad accent. He was given straight fire. By your own logic, he should have been the most popular analyst forever. Me, Richard, and others had to like work with this guy's image for years and years, and then eventually it ticked over and he was accepted. So I personally think fans, they not only don't care about real tactical stuff, because they can't comprehend it, they wouldn't even know the difference. I saw this in my own field. When I was seeing all those people suggesting names who should have been hired to the major, mate, they were suggesting names where it's like, holy fuck, that person is a 6 out of 10, and you want them to replace a 9 out of 10. Because what you find is, basically, you have to be an 8 out of 10 to know why the 10 out of 10 is unbelievable. Like, I'll give you an example. There were some names, I won't say who were suggested as host, which were a fucking joke. These were people whose basically their entire body of work is DreamHack Opens. Now, all I'll tell you is this. If you've seen what a host like Machine or Richard Lewis does behind the scenes and what they're working with in their ear, and the fact that they're freestyling half of what they do, they are on another fucking plane to someone who does DreamHack Open. Like, DreamHack Open is an incredibly structured, like, literally follow point by point thing, where you even, the analysts are even, spoiler, giving their points to the host before. So I'm not saying that host is good enough. I'm saying they haven't yet proven that they're on the level. But a fan just goes, I like that host. I don't like Richard. So they should have the job. It's like that basically with, as you're saying, analysis. It's why the joke is, who's the only one who's actually enjoyed an analysis the whole time? It's me. And why is it? It's like lurppis said, because I stick to narrative story building that people can understand, and I've built up my whole lexicon over 10 years, so, you know, people are kind of primed to understand the stories. And then I use entertainment. The one thing you can never say is I'm never fucking boring. I come with the jokes, I have an angle, I'll even be the villain sometimes so people have a reason to fucking basically pull for an underdog that shouldn't win, because I've sort of said they have no chance. Like, people don't get it. As much as they hate on it, that is the most enduring factor. If you can entertain people, you have everyone.
That is, I mean, yeah, that's why I think, I mean, certain analysts that just don't bring entertainment value are just, they're just lower on the totem pole, frankly.
They have a hard time for sure.
Yeah, that's just,
here's the other one, dude. The way you know fans don't actually care about tactics is this. I'm not going to name names, but you're going to all instantly think of certain names. You know when they bring a guy who's just been cut from his team as a pro, so they bring him to the next LAN as an analyst. Dude, these guys spit the most basic bitch 101 analysis about the teams because they haven't had time to study them, they just played them. And people on Reddit are always like, incredible insights. I really hope he does. And if you're an analyst, you're just losing your mind at this point. Like, what are you talking about? That guy, all he said was Astralis is tactical. Like, what are you talking? You know what I mean? But like, the fan doesn't know. The fan doesn't know, does he? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where, like, I guess it leads me to just kind of restructure how I should think about like content creation. When I look at a lot of content creators right now, you know, you look at Alan's, Haka's, Dat Paladin, all these people that kind of do more breakdowns type stuff, and it's just kind of where it's gotten most of them. It's just not like people just don't really.
It's ignored largely.
And even like also, I was thinking like the double scope things, like that was incredibly well produced with Anders, Yanko, and myself. And it's like they barely got any views at all. And it's just like, oh man, it's so obvious that no one really cares that much. Like it's just like whoever the only people that care about who wins and loses seem to be like complete like narrative whores or just people that are fans of teams. Like I don't think people, The
one thing we haven't talked about that I think contributes to this just like consistently, or maybe like the damage has already been done to some extent, is that like I think the reason that people generally speaking have like a negative assumption of like what the analysts do and say is that like the structure of the analyst segments has always been just like absolute fucking garbage. Like you have like it's like 2 minutes between three people and the host always takes too long to like talk about something and like assume. And then the two analysts have like 45 seconds each, and like you have to structure it so that like I get to say something, you get to react to it, then you get to say something and I get to react to it, and the host says something in the middle and then at the beginning at the end. And like unsurprisingly, when you have all those restrictions and limitations in place, it's hard to make like a very intelligent point that like the viewers will find interesting. And like if you do that, you just roll that structure forward for a decade. It like if that's all they've ever heard, it's also understandable why like people are just like, well, like why do I want to watch that for longer? Because like it is a bad format. Like that's not how it should work.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the desk doesn't really serve analysis, actually. Like, I almost don't even feel like analyst is the proper term for most people on a desk.
It's not.
It
It's not.
just should be talking head, That's
I mean,
just
in
what
English,
it
we
is.
have the term, we just call them pundits. It's just
Yeah,
not there to give an
sure.
opinion.
Yeah, pundits. Yeah, that's fine.
You know, here's the thing that people don't get. One, sadly, I was trying to do this on Flashpoint, as Maui knows. It's just what people will never understand is, I never ran a Flashpoint tournament I wanted to. I ran other people's compromised versions of a Flashpoint tournament. Like, I never got to do a whole bunch of the things I wanted. So I wanted, like, only 2 analysts on a desk. Sometimes I wanted maybe even me to be the host or someone so we can, like, freestyle it more. I wanted to have a pre-game show that would have been way longer, that you could hit every big topic. And then the idea is, even if you don't get everything on the desk, you got a bunch. I thought the wrap-up show, listen, we made it basically entirely entertainment. It should have been more analysis entertainment mixed, And then the other thing is, I do think it's possible to get this through, but you have to use the old idiom of, like, spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. Basically, you have to use my style and then combine it with real analysis. And so that is very, very hard to do, because you have to basically either have a team of people or you have to have someone who's learned 2 different skill sets, and that's pretty rare, because as you say, like, the way you get good at the attritional analysis, you just go in demos and hours in a demo. Problem is, that doesn't help you deliver a joke, fucking connective, so that, I think, the real problem is it's almost a misnomer. Like, what we really want is interested people who have opinions, and then within that, by the way, this is why I've always told people like Maniac, this is how you brand yourself. You could be the guy who's straight edge and just does tactical stuff, call yourself the professor, make that your shit, but so everyone can't do it. It's why I always used to say the dumbest take of all time was when people would be like, I just want the desk to be Yanko, and then whatever, put in 2 other people that are like that. I was like, that'd be even Yanko would tell it the most boring desk of all time. It took Yanko a few years to learn those skills, You want balance on it.
Yeah. There could have been I think there was definitely room to change the desk. I think at least some TOs like Blast are doing a pretty decent job at incorporating some strategic elements, like a certain replays that they put together. We did some at Flashpoint, with the Skybox stuff too. There's a lot of room to grow in that area, and it almost feels like it should be a side content piece that. And then I would actually just make desks more free flowing, like what you want to do, Thorin, because I don't think sometimes the mix and match of free flowing and trying to make it structured just leads to like doing either
that's the
very
worst.
well.
That's
it
the
doesn't
worst.
do either.
You should just have somebody who's like Duncan should actually be in some ways like the host, because he could be the one sort of like running the flow of it, and then you could kind of go wherever it makes sense to go. Like, I mean, we all know, like, the worst case is like sometimes you actually get to talk about something interesting and you have like a good conversation, and you just hear somebody in your ear like, replay, you gotta go to replays now, replays, we're running out of time, replays, and you're just like, Jesus, dude, like,
there's a reason that the whole like inside the NBA at night thing is so successful and effective, just because it's for talking heads that don't need replays and they just talk about interesting stuff from their perspectives. Yes. And they have
put it this way. One of the things that I've always thought was so whack, lurppis alluded to it. This was more back in the old days. 'Cause as I said, actually, a lot of the hosts now do ask the analysts for the point that they want to make. Dude, you should see the days when we never, ever, ever did that structure. If this is what would happen, you got a 2-minute segment. The host, who might be like a legendary broadcasting figure, spends 30 seconds setting up a point none of us wanted to talk about from an angle none of us cared about. That's why I just started being gangster. And if he was like, so tell me why... I probably shouldn't do that voice, but, that's just a generic voice. Whatever. You all know I don't give a fuck. He goes, so tell me bloody why, Thorin. Why is NIP the best team at this tournament? And this would be like, when they were like the 5th best team, and I'd be like, well, a lot of people would think that, whoever you are with an incredibly iconic, recognisable voice. Really just a stand-in cipher for any host that could be there. Sadly, Thorin said an iconic figure within broadcasting. But yeah, I actually think they're not, which is interesting. Oh, interesting. Tell me more. And then, maybe I could crowbar it. But the sad thing is, the others used to be too polite, dude. They just start answering the question. I'm like, why are you just wasting your fucking time humouring him because you don't want him to feel bad? Like, I agree. Like, the whole structure's shit. And then, as you said, you've hit the key nail on the head. because it's been a shit structure for so many years. If you say to a fan, like I did years ago, I want like 10 minutes more for the fucking veto, they're like, who cares about the veto? Everyone they don't know what they don't know. Like, they really think like that it would just be more of the same. It wouldn't. It would be, if it was even literally a 10-minute desk, the places we could go and the mega conversations we could have could be incredible. The way we could even drill down on some of the stuff would actually be fucking next level. It really would be. That's why I actually think, to tie it all back together, since you mentioned the detail angle, the future of this is actually, by the way, it's not the broadcast that will do it. It is going to be shoulder content from third-party organisations. Spoiler, I'm sort of saying I'm going to do some of this stuff, or other people like me are going to do it in the future, but it'll just be basically on other websites and elsewhere. Like, you'll get some breakdowns, you'll get some analysis, some interesting elements. Like, I just don't think, unfortunately, the TOs actually, they don't really seem like long-term, like they also agree with our vision. They sort of do. Look, I've had producers just tell me, dude, you're basically here to keep your mouth moving until I play the ad and then start the game. And listen, I always even said to them, why are you saying that to me, of all people? But okay, whatever, keep paying me, dickhead. Because I know, but listen, say that to like some of the others, they'll be able to take it. I'll just tell you to go show up your ass, but whatever.
I was all right about my point, and now I think we're ending on like... No,
there's one left. There's one left.
Oh, okay, so bring us back.
So my point for ugly, because actually there's a lot of ways we can go with this one. I've just put poison being, I presume, cut from complexity. Now, the reason I say I presume cut is because if you look how long he was there, I think they said something like he was there for 21 months or something. That would be a very weird contract, a 21-month contract. 2, they just failed to make the major. That's when people get cut. And then 3, they've released him and he's a free agent. Now, that sounds to me, by the way, like, listen, bad news is I have to cut you. Good news, I'll make sure there's no buyout. And, you did a good job with the orgs, so you can just go out free. Now, the reason I say this is my ugly point, I don't put it as bad, is because I actually did think through a bunch of complexities period, poison was a problem. Like, I remember the style of when they came on LAN and they broke it. Oh my God. I even remember saying to people, listen, if he can maintain that AWPing style and be good, you are aware he's just a top 5 AWPer in the entire world. Like, he was so aggressive. He was just reaming people out with instant flicks. He was fucking wrecking Astralis, dude. Like, I remember thinking, there's no way this is legit. And he's one of those guys he was just too good in tier 2, but I don't think he ever truly was like a true superstar elite AWPer. So I know I actually didn't have a bad few months leading up to now, and he had certain periods where he looked good, but I always thought he didn't really like fit the team in some sense. I didn't think he was quite good enough. So as sad as it is, I do think he should be cut, but sort of the weight and the timing, like, if anything, he wasn't even the worst player at the moment. Like, he actually was in a bit of a renaissance of form. And I do think as well, if you know some of the fuckery that was going on behind the scenes, where like Cole could have been one of these teams that got Astralis players, or maybe Config State, I get the feeling, unfortunately, he was just a victim of the fact that they're now having to make these mad triage decisions, and they've obviously gambled on other players, and basically he's just the guy who has to go. It's just he's the only person sort of in the crosshairs. So I just think it's a bit ugly the way it sort of all worked out for everyone involved there.
It coincides pretty neatly with coldzera joining the roster, and there was that famous Cold line when he's talking to Fallen in a clutch, he says if noobs always peak. I mean, he's talking about poison. Like, that's just literally, that's why poison's gone. Like, poison just always had to peak. Like, during the tier 2, like, online cups that they were playing in, he would just jump through smokes and just op people. Like, it was the least sustainable style ever. It was just serious. It was seriously like, if you miss shots, you're just going to die. And he started missing and he started dying predictably. Yes. So it was never, it was not going to, like, if there were an OG complexity mismatch kind of thing, I think I'd love to see where that goes, because both of those teams didn't make the major, and I think that you can make a really solid roster with those pieces.
Thoughts, Tommy?
That's interesting. So I don't know why he was cut. I mean, I've heard some things that I'm not gonna elaborate on. But like, I do think it's the opposite of ugly here is that he actually seems to have just gotten out. Like you said, like, I don't think there's any chance that he was like a 21-month contract. I don't think so. So like, it seems like he was at least able to get out immediately and just basically look for a new team. So for him, like, couldn't actually be a better timing. The major's going to be over in some number of weeks, and like in 2 months at the very latest, there's going to be massive shuffle. So you would think there would be some place for him to go. The gold thing, I think, is it's an interesting thing. presumably, I mean, he did say that like he's not signed long term. It's like a short term thing. Presumably, his number one priority will just be like winning. He just wants to have a competitive roster. So if he thinks that there's players who are longer time horizon away, need more time to develop, etc., I would guess that he's always going to be on the side of like, let's just get the more like experienced people, which is probably why they tried Dallo in that qualifier, for example. Obviously he hasn't played in a while, so play was what it was. But I guess that's really it. The OG Cole sort of roster merger, I think, would actually be interesting. I think you could build a pretty interesting roster out of that. And I recently actually was wondering whether some of the players who were at the time choosing between those two teams made the right choice or not. That I'm not sure, because I think both those teams have looked pretty good at times, but like neither has really broken through to like where they were supposed to go.
Yeah, one thing I would say, by the way, because people might think that tier 2 comment I made was weird, right? One of the reasons why anyone at tier 1 and people around that element of the scene for a long time are always incredibly skeptical of really aggressive, super strong mechanical players when they come to tier 1 is because that is the least fucking reliable playing style you can have. Like, do you really think Device actually just wants to be like passive at times and just No, he knows, by the way, he gets murked if he just 24/7 peeks the corner like old school Henny. Like that, you have to be simple Ozimu to do that. Like, it's almost impossible to get away with that constantly. You have to be a superhuman.
If you read the body language of players like Device when he goes for 2 repeaks and gets 3 kills, it's just like he's literally laughing in his chair because he knows how stupid that was.
Exactly.
If he plays the same round and he just gets like 1 kill, falls back, gets another kill, falls back, gets a third, he's not smiling. He's not happy about that. He's just like, I just played optimally.
He just did his job.
I just did my job.
It's like the thing when we talked about like when people play anti-ecos, but back when anti-ecos used to exist before they killed the economy altogether. Like people used to play them fast and not clear things with mollies, etc. And like I would say, like it's because it's more fun. Like people enjoy playing that. Where like, why would somebody do it? Because it's more fun. They're playing for millions of dollars. I'm like, well, because they're people, and like I'm just telling you that's why they're doing it. And it's like the exact same thing. Like it's much more fun to play like just like re-peeking and like going for things than it is to like just hold a corner for a minute, even if that ends up with you winning.
Like I'll give you 2 quick.
Doesn't want to do that.
I'll give you 2 quick examples. Like one is, there's that story that people on Reddit always use as a way to trash the G2 players, mainly like Shock's, KDS existence. The story where like they could have had Zero like, 6 months earlier and they didn't want him because supposedly a bunch of them thought he cheated, right? Anyone who thinks that's ridiculous, you haven't seen the games that he was playing. Like, if you go and watch the fucking games he was playing when he was in the Against All Authority era and winning all the FPL games, he had to be either what he is, one of the best 5 players to ever play CSGO, or he was cheating. I'm telling you right now, I saw those games and I was even messaging pros like, this cannot be legit, right? And they were just telling me like, look, it does look really dodgy, but like for real, he probably is like the fucking next Prodigy or something. And then the other one, because it's a similar example of how you should be skeptical, is back in CS 1.6, there was a really great AWPer in the latter years called Delpan. And he was someone who, one, as far as I can tell, potentially was involved with actual cheating. And 2, his style also looked like, look, this guy's either for real the best AWPer in the world or he's just cheating. Like, there's no way he could be doing this. Now, it turned out, Mauisnake, when he went to LAN, he actually was the best AWPer in the world. He was like a top 3 AWPer. So, but the point is, you can see the point here. There's so few people ever going to make it through that fucking threshold. Realistically, the rest of them are just going to go up to tier 1, get bashed on the head like Poisonous to some degree. And I personally predict he probably won't go to a very good team. He'll go to an okay team. It might even go to one of the Bulgarian teams. There's 2 of them that are pretty decent right now. So, unfortunately, I don't think this is like, he takes a step back and then 2 steps. No, I think this is probably the last you see of him in a contender.
Well, the reason that I think you're right about him going to like a Bulgarian team is if he didn't know where he wanted to go and like that team wasn't going to pay any buyout, I think Jason Lake would have taken the money. But, like if I think the answer probably was like, listen, like I know this is not working out. Like I want to go play with my like fellow countrymen and like, but they're not going to have money for a buyout. Like that's a conversation that leads to you being released. Otherwise, like why not at least like see if there's a market?
There's a handful of Bulgarian teams right now, actually. So the market is kind of like
good. Fiend's been good.
In terms of competitiveness, you got Fiend, you got Skade, I think there's probably a couple others that are like not in the top 30 but almost there. So like that's becoming a weirdly competitive region out of nowhere. So yeah, that'd be kind of interesting to see if he can find his form again on a roster like that.
This video was kindly supported by Lagger15, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Skaparen, Travis Goff, Zack Schmidt, Adam Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Chris, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and as always, a special thanks goes out to both Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask a question for my monthly AMA? Want teasers for upcoming content or interview guests have I done, etc.? Do you want to take part in one of those donated discussions? Well, if you want any of the above and previously mentioned, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scruminati today at the description box link to Patreon.